Hello everybody, Dr. Nick. Anyway, so this is my last video on the practicality and morality of voting. Just gonna get right into it. This is going to be probably be a long video. I don't know if I'll be able to do this one part, so this may be two different parts within a part. You know, we've already gone over how that works before. So I want to get into the alternatives to voting. Just my general thoughts, some final clarifications, and then I'll probably, this will probably take care of me talking about voting on a video ever again. Unless I find some other aspect that I think is interesting, this will probably be my last talk about voting, because I don't think there's much more to the issue than this. But if anybody ever wants me to do a video again on voting, give me a specific issue about it, and I'll, look it up, look about articles about it, pros and cons, weigh my options, etc. Alright, but let's get into this. So I want to get into the alternatives to voting, and I want to dedicate about 4 minutes each to it. And so the first one is agorism. Agorism was an idea started by Samuel Edward Konkin III. Samuel Edward Konkin III. And he has a Wikipedia page that I will link in the description, so you can learn more about him. It was also due to, he was the first guy who came up with the idea. Agorism is basically comes from the Greek word agora, which means marketplace. So it basically translates to marketplace-ism. But in this case, it's a truly freed market, one free of government restrictions, the parasitic political class, and so on. So it was started in the 60s based on the idea of the counterculture movement. Konkin added the counter-economic movement, which basically said to replace the state's white and red markets, which basically the legal markets, and the red markets are the violent markets, with black markets and gray markets, things where voluntary action and peaceful action happen, but they're done legally. The red market is where the violence takes place. And then sometimes the white and the red overlap, and I guess they call it the pink market, where legal products are sold, but it's done through violence. Anyway. So basically, Konkin started up on this idea. He had a few supporters. Karl Hess and Rothbard back in the 60s and 70s were both part of the, kind of rooting for the new left as part of the Libertarian movement, and they were they supported Konkin's ideas, and I believe they had some discussions here and there. It had a lot to do with the new left. Konkin had this newspaper or newsletter. Basically, it was a collection of individuals, and it proudly said that all who write here disagree, or something like that. And I'll probably link that in the description too, or it'll probably be in his Wikipedia page. It had a lot to do with the Vietnam, and going against the war, going against corporate welfare, going against privileges, being for a more pluralistic, culturally aware society, and so forth. So it was a really kind of coalition. There's a kind of a coalition going on between Ralph Nader and Ron Paul right now, the Progressive Libertarian Alliance, which in some ways kind of, I don't know how well it'll go. I'll link a few articles about it. One specifically from Sheldon Richman, which is, I think was just today, and then there's another one that was on the Freeman, and that might have also been Sheldon Richman, I don't know. So left libertarianism is a broad spectrum of left influences, and by left I mean anti-corporations, anti-big business, anti-privilege, anti, for a more pluralistic, culturally aware society. I'll link the Left Libertarian Manifesto, which is not mine. It was on Mises.org, and it was on the forums, and I will link that, and hopefully you'll get a good idea of what I'm talking about when I mean left libertarian. I will probably have a video series on that eventually as well. So I'm just kind of reading from the script, and agorism fits in with left libertarianism because it's basically revolutionary market anarchism. That's what agorism is. It's free marketism, but it's a specific kind of free marketism. It's revolutionary market anarchism, and by revolutionary I mean it basically prescribes a specific strategy for overthrowing the state through not necessarily violence, although defensive violence is advocated if necessary, but through radical change in society. And in the social realm, the political realm, the cultural realm. So it's a revolution of sorts, or revolutionary market anarchism of sorts, specifically on the left wing of market anarchism. I consider myself a left-wing market anarchist. I'll clarify what that means in some other video, but for now, that just means I believe in a truly free market, and I believe that that society is best governed when it's self-organizing and not from the top down. So agorism, that's a simple definition. Revolutionary market anarchism. I'll put up agorism.info or .start or whatever it is, run by the great man named Brad Spangler, who runs that site, I believe. And counter-economics, I basically talked about that. Agorism also does not tell people to do within the system activism. It's mostly outside the system activism. And then there's no real forcing people's... I mean, you're not really forcing... The thing about anarchism is people say, well, if you're so against, coercion and force, why are you forcing your ideas, beliefs on society? And whenever you say that, whenever someone says this to you, you can always say, well, we're not. We're going to create alternative and counter institutions, and we're going to see how well it goes. If people want to subscribe to those institutions, they can. If people want to give their money to the associations, they can. It's nothing forced. We're not forcing people to associate with us. We're associating with each other based on a common belief. And if you want to join us, join us. I recommend the New Libertarian Manifesto, and I'm only going to recommend what I've read, to be honest, so I can keep myself honest. The Last Whole Introduction to Agorism and Agorist Class Theory. Those are all three fantastic reads about what agorism is. Agorism, to me, is not a political philosophy, it's a strategy. Even though I said it's revolutionary market anarchism, I believe it's a specific... It's like a revolutionary market anarchism strategy. I mean, I would kind of say it's more of a strategy than a political philosophy. I mean, even though it has a class theory, as we can see, and there's a manifesto about it, and there's an introduction to it, I would say that it's more of a strategy for people who believe in market anarchism than an actual philosophy in of itself, because the agorist class theory, the introduction, and the manifesto mostly just rehash anarchist ideas with a few twists here and there, and stuff like that. So I'm going to get into the second alternative for voting, which is civil disobedience. And civil disobedience is basically political action that aims at breaking established rules, but generally through peaceful means. I'm going to say that civil disobedience mostly relies on peaceful action, and I'm going to link Henry David Thoreau's classic essay on civil disobedience. Now, there's a right way and a wrong way, I think, to go about civil disobedience. There's a right way. You can refuse to obey unjust laws, but make sure they're big deals. And make sure you got a lot of people behind you beforehand. So people make, a big stink about something insignificant. Like, let's take the recent case of Pete Eyre and Adam Mueller, who were arrested. Adam was arrested for contempt of court, and Pete was arrested for having a hat in court. And these aren't exactly cases of civil disobedience. These aren't exactly cases of civil disobedience. So actually, no, scratch that. I guess what I would be saying is that the minuscule cases, like, stuff that doesn't have a lot of popular support by it, that's not really important. I mean, like taking your hat off during court, I don't think it's a big deal. I know it's a big deal if you take it within the realm of, like, it's a smaller thing, but it's a big part of a much larger thing. But I think we should be focusing on other smaller actions, perhaps more significant actions. Which is why I kind of reject what a lot of people do in Keene, New Hampshire, because I think a lot of what they do in there is just kind of baiting the police to arrest them. And I know that it's not intended like that, and it's probably not meant to, but honestly, it just always seems like they're just throwing a target on their back and say, hey, arrest me, And, I understand the frustration. It's not like they're not coming from anywhere logical. It's not like I completely disagree with them. But I think agorism, direct action, and then there's a right way to go about civil disobedience. And the right way to go about it for me is to tackle important issues that have popular support, like the smoking weed, like the 420 protests. Those are good. Those have a lot of cultural backing. Those have a lot of backing in general. And those can be smaller things leading to bigger things, like a revolution. So, which is a much bigger thing. But still, it could lead to it. I'm definitely going to have to put this into different parts. Gandhi and MLK were definitely very good at civil disobedience. Cooperation with authority is not always necessary, but if you're going to do civil disobedience, I recommend being cooperative with authorities insofar as it does not harm you or others. If they're not going to harm you or not going to harm other people, which is mostly what they do anyway, then, you know, give them a hard time about it, you know. If they threaten violence, then I think that's when you have to start being cooperative with them. I mean, I know it seems like a cop-out, but it seems to me that going to jail and getting busted up isn't really worth it just to protest one law. But I don't know, it's all up to the individual. It's all a calculation issue. It's all cost-benefit. So whatever you think is worth it, I mean, go for it. But I think there's a right way and a wrong way to go about civil disobedience, and I tried to etch out a little outline of what I thought was the right way. So I mean, to review, it should be an important issue with popular support. You should get the community around you beforehand, and then organize the event, and just try to keep it, just try to make sure it goes smoothly. And as far as cooperation with authorities, I mean, if they're going to threaten violence, then you might as well cooperate with them. Violence is their job to begin with. So that would be the most consistent, practical, and moral application to me. And you know, if anyone wants me to do a video on it, I'll try to expand my thoughts. So direct action. I'll probably do direct action, and then I'll end it off there. Outside the system activity that can be, but is not necessarily, limited to breaking established rules or customs, and can be violent or non-violent. Though it should be noted, I do not support violent direct action such as murder, assassination, even sabotage to a certain extent. I don't really support. But what constitutes violence? I mean, there are people who are in the animal liberation movement or something like that, and like when they destroy property, like and to free animals, they don't really see as they're harming anyone because there's no person being violated. It's just property rights. So that's an interesting take. I don't know whether I believe it or not. Violence is physical aggression against an individual, and because property is most oftentimes an extension of the individual or an extension of your labor, it could be considered violence. I think that's a gray area. I think depending on whether the ownership of your property is legitimate or not. And usually these corporations that are, if you have a corporation, for instance, that says, like, you know, that holds up animals and slaughters them inhumanely and so on and so forth, and feeds them their own shit, then and you know, they get a lot of subsidies from the state, and they're mostly run through the state. Sure, I mean, break their property. I don't advocate violence. I don't advocate destruction per se, but I wouldn't say it's immoral. I wouldn't say it's practical though. So direct action has always kind of had a big movement in history, and strikes at nuclear plants, the anti-nuclear movement, worker strikes, employer versus employee. During the 1930s, there were a lot of labor unions. Labor laws stopped that, you know, so on. I think it could be best applied because direct action aims at a similar end that civil disobedience does. I think they're best done through things like food, not bombs, because you're directly providing food. You're not harming anyone. You're not destroying any property. Just mutual aid, solidarity, cooperation. The internet's a great decentralized way, although it can be, you know, negator. Employer versus employee relations, civil disobedience is very good. I'll link something called How to Fire Your Boss. And then power relations in general. Alright, so the next video I'm going to be doing dual power, and I'm going to be doing my last thoughts on voting and final words in general. Alright, so I will have that video up as soon as I'm done editing this one. So it should be about, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes. Alright, see you guys then.